2013, it was legalized in the United States to propagandize its citizens. What? Like, that's some scary third world stuff going on. That's the kind of stuff that people use to topple governments, to take away freedoms.
We are concerned about troubling and irresponsible, one-sided news stories plaguing our country.
False news has become all too common on social media.
Federal Reserve System is a scam. Any questions? If you have the courage to read the Federal Reserve Act, you talk about boring, but it's all in there. The United States Congress passed a law which in essence was a cartel agreement for all the major banks to come together and share the market and control the market to their advantage.
The constitutional dollar is defined as a weight of gold or silver. The genius of the Federal Reserve Plan was it inserted a man in the middle in 1913 between the Constitution and the people in the form of the Federal Reserve. And that was the introduction of the Fed dollar. It's not the dollar that is defined by the Constitution. It's a note that's issued by the Federal Reserve.
Hey, Inspire Tribe, my fellow freedom lovers, John Nolan here. Thank you so much for tuning in. It is it Thursday again? That's crazy. It's Thursday, February 6th, 2024, out of the matrix into prime reality. We're rebranding the mantra here, but please don't forget that we're healthy, wealthy, whole, and free also. I see that in recent weeks and days, since we are focusing, of course, a little bit more on what's happening in this country, also politically and all of that, the algorithm is not favoring us. I know many are not getting notifications. Well, that's a surprise. But hey, here we are talking about what we're going to talk about. Please make sure that you like, comment, and share if you think it's, valuable and think others might get some value from seeing this. We are, and completely understandably getting a lot of messages. A lot of people saying, hey, so much is happening. So much is changing. And I want to put out a correction. Nothing is changing. But caveat is people are making change happen. So, in the language that a lot of people use is they think things are just changing. Nothing just changes. In our human society, nothing just changes ever. People make change happen. That's the truth. That's reality. And either people are part of the changers or they're part of the ones being changed, That's just how it is. Today, we want to talk about how serious, is this new administration, how serious is this Trump 3.0 that has a lot of people puzzled, a lot of people don't know who that guy is. A lot of people say he's better than ever. A lot of people are going, okay, so, the emperor has no clothes. Same shit all over again. That's not what this is about. This administration is literally moving in and pulling off a project of disclosure. Now, for now, it's soft disclosure. It's all things that we already knew. They're just being projected from the government itself to the public. This is sort of the novelty, right? So you have everyday revelations. The past few days, the USAID, the US aid program, which is basically just, how do we redistribute money to our buddies and our firms and our lobbyists and whatnot, and put on paper some legitimate or illegitimate cause. And so you've seen to the account of millions of dollars that go to what was the most weird I've ever seen? I mean, we shared some of those yesterday. It's so weird you can't even imagine it. But The question is, are they serious about these things? You know, is there any seriousness to the work here long term? And if that is the case, then some laws need to be repealed, laws that literally enslave the people and keep them in a state of disinformation and a false reality. And today we want to talk about some of the laws that would have to be repealed immediately to restore a certain level of freedom and sovereignty for the people. It would also almost overnight, but let's say within a few short years, create a level of self-sufficiency on all levels that any old structure of government could never want. But this government pretends it's a new government. It's a new way of doing things. It's for the people, actually. So let's talk about these laws, right? And before we go into it, I just want to say something. In terms of people ask us all the time, hey, what can I do? What can we do? What should we do? Like I have been saying, everybody has a purpose or a feeling that they can do or accomplish something in their hearts. Doing that is the best thing you can do, but you can't do it all. So when we put information out that might be new or interesting or inspiring to do something about it, we kind of count on the fact that somebody's going to pick that stuff up and do something about it, right? Because we can't do it all. And, you know, frankly, we're, like I said, we've overextended ourselves significantly over the last years, but we count on you. So when we talk about repealing the laws here that we're going to talk about, that's also a call to action. People are already doing it. Find those people, connect forces, connect energies, co-create together. All righty, let's look at this. The secrecy and suppression of technology. These laws and orders allow the government to classify, conceal, or seize groundbreaking technologies under the guise of national security. We did a whole show on the Invention Secrecy Act of 1951. I encourage you to look up that show. We break it down in every detail. But basically, it allows the government to classify and suppress patents that may be deemed a threat to national security. Many believe this has been used to keep free energy, anti-gravity, and other disruptive technologies out of public hands. It should be repealed or reformed to prevent abuse under vague national security claims. Now, the intricacies of the of the Invention Secrecy Act are so appalling, because it literally says that anything that is disruptive, could be disruptive to the economy, can be put under national secrecy. And you know, we know of at least 6,000 patents that have been classified because of the Invention Secrecy Act. We also know, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that while we're talking about power plants and power lines and electricity, we're basically, in terms of technology, we're talking about the Stone Age of technology in terms of what would be available. And what have all inventors and patent holders that were brave enough to speak out said over the years? We were intimidated, we were incarcerated, we were blackmailed, we were threatened. All of these things. Killed, you know, of course, the ones who were killed can't talk anymore. But basically, anything and everything. Now, what we didn't know for a long time was that they were doing it under the guise of the law. Because the Invention Secrecy Act basically gives the government such a broad power to classify certain things that they can do pretty much anything. That needs to be repealed. Boom. That just needs to go away. Imagine what that would do. We always have to imagine, think about it. And I've said this when we did the show on this Secrecy Act. It basically, since 1951, at least since then, because it was codified into law, since then it has created a completely false reality, a matrix in and of itself, because there are people who are coming up with incredible solutions for some of our greatest current problems, but those solutions never meet the market, never meet the attention of the people. Instead, they're being hidden and killed and suppressed. And what is old and dependent technology, which means that we depend on somebody else providing it for us, that is being pushed onto the people as the cutting edge, which creates a completely false sense of reality, right? Imagine if every household, just as effortless today as many households can take care of, I don't know, their own heating system if they want to. Isolated heating, heating that originates where the source of the heating is where you are, where you don't use gas, but maybe you use wood or another kind of burning stove or pellets or something like that. Imagine if electricity, the source of your electricity, would actually be where you are. No power plants, no power lines, no meters. Imagine just that. And that would happen when laws like this one would be repealed. That would happen very quickly. Imagine the level of independence that would create. All right, let's move forward. Title 50, U.S. Code 3815, Emergency Powers in Wartime and National Defense, grants sweeping authority to seize private assets, patents, and inventions under emergency conditions. This is what happened during 2020. Those acts and certain emergency powers were invoked, and these things were happening. Actually, facilities were seized, facilities were taken over by the government, things were kept under the rug. A lot of secrecy, suppression of information, and all of that happened. And it happened according to these codes and laws legally within their system. So this should be repealed or limited to prevent arbitrary technological suppression. What else? Executive Order 13292 and prior classification orders. It strengthens the government's ability to classify documents indefinitely, making it easier to suppress information on hidden technologies, suppressed energy breakthroughs, and black budget projects. They should be repealed or heavily modified to prevent abuse. Now, these things, you can go, and whatever you think of the guy, but you can go, for example, Dr. Stephen Greer has talked about this a lot because it's part of his disclosure project. But I want to say something, pretty clearly, that while these are laws in the U.S., the equivalent of such laws usually exist in any other country. They might be called something different, but the fact that every country, for example, still has an antiquated electric system that hasn't fundamentally changed in the last 120 years or so. I mean, literally hasn't changed. You think about where we are on these things, and even this technology here is, antiquated compared to what exists out there. But look at where we are in terms of communication, the internet, AI, and all of that. And it still runs on antiquated old power lines that weren't even the cutting edge technology at the time that they were presented. They were just something that was put in place so you could control it and put a meter on it, charge people, and hold it over their heads as a tool. All right. What other laws would need to be repealed? Media and propaganda control, which goes hand in hand, right? Because you need to be able to control the flow of information. But what most people don't know, they think it's illegal. It's really not. They allow themselves to do that. Several laws have enabled the government and intelligence agencies to manipulate public perception through media control and PSYOP, psychological operations. The Smith-Mundt Modernization Act of 2012, which was part of the NDAA in the Obama administration, this is one of the most egregious things that went into effect in 2013, which legalized domestic propaganda by allowing the U.S. government to disseminate its own narratives through mainstream media. Previously, the 1948 Smith-Mundt Act prohibited this practice. Imagine this, and most people don't know this. They think that media companies might be corrupt and in the way that they receive money from sponsors and big pharma and whatnot, and that because of that money, their reporting is biased. They might understand that political parties and their donors might make contributions to the media companies, and because of that, they're biased. That's not at all what this is really about. This is about the ability, the legal ability for news organizations to not only lie, outright lie, but to get their scripts from the government to lie for the government. That is the legalization of propaganda. And every country has a propaganda arm for foreign audiences. Every country of any significance has that. So they will have propaganda radio stations in the past and TV stations and whatnot that sends out information to foreign populations to influence them. Now, that's one thing. But since 2013, and it's happened, of course, before, and it was happening before, but since 2013, this is legal to propagandize the US population. So what that means is, to a very, very, very large degree, the population has lived in a completely false informational sphere, completely fake, completely invented. So this, of course, should be repealed to restore journalistic integrity and prevent government-funded manipulation. For the government to be involved in information dissemination beyond the most necessary things that it has to share with the people, and that it should share with the people openly and honestly about the state of affairs, but for it to be involved in, shaping the narrative, shaping the story, is insane. It's the antithesis of freedom, free speech, and free press. Now, of course, we've also learned that to a large degree, and now it's official, we've always known this, the government through its various organizations is, imagine this, is even sponsoring the BBC, which is the UK's state-run media corporation, the British Broadcasting Syndicate. And the American government is directly sending money to a sub-organization. Yeah, granted, I don't think the BBC parent company, but a BBC sub-organization. So we're learning now as a public, we've known this, but the public is now learning things that they couldn't even imagine was happening. And it's happening legally, by the way. Operation Mockingbird, for the legacy media. And this is where we all saw this famous clip of all the local news stations saying the exact same thing because they're reading from the same script. While never officially legislated, the CIA's involvement in controlling media narrative has been well documented. Policies should be put in place that prohibit intelligence agencies from direct or indirect influence over the media. It has been said for many, many decades now that there isn't a news organization in America and abroad, for that matter, that doesn't have a CIA asset within their ranks, sometimes known, usually unbeknownst to them. I would say oftentimes known. I would say oftentimes these are becoming more open cooperations. The same, by the way, exists for social media companies. Now, we could go a step further and say that virtually all social media companies are largely funded by the intelligence apparatus through InQtel and other funds that are very openly run by the intelligence community. There's an inner mingling and intertwining between the government and the media and the press that is, so embedded. And any law on the books that protects this needs to be repealed immediately, because when this protection is gone, this thing can be attacked head on, which it has to be. It has to be. Financial and economic control. These laws allow financial control over people through taxation, debt systems, and suppression of alternative financial systems. The Federal Reserve Act created the privately owned Federal Reserve banking system, which controls currency issuance and interest rates. which is, by the way, goes hand in hand with the creation of the Internal Revenue Service and the, I would still say, in my opinion, illegitimately amended Constitution, because it didn't fulfill the necessary requirements for the Constitution to be amended, which created the income tax, which is, in my perception, still to this day unconstitutional. But the Federal Reserve Act and the income tax and the IRS, they went hand in hand. One does not exist without the other. The Federal Reserve is a conglomerate of private banks that issues legal tender, the Federal Reserve note, that mimics as the US dollar, which it isn't. So we think, you open your wallet, if you still hold cash, you think you're holding dollars. You're not really holding dollars. Read the fine print. It's a Federal Reserve note for all legal tender to public. It's a legal tender for all debts, public and private. It is a fiat. It has no inherent. It used to be officially attached to gold as the asset backing its value. That isn't happening anymore since the 60s, officially since the 70s. So it is basically a money printing machine for the elites, and it gives authority to private banks to issue money. And many people still don't understand the concept. When you today go to a bank and you want to take out a loan, to this day, the vast majority of people still think that the bank somewhere in their accounts is holding money. Let's say it's holding $500,000 and you just want to borrow 100,000. Most people think that the bank then takes 100,000 from that 500,000 that it holds and it loans it to you against interest. Unless you are requesting, because you're of a certain ethnicity or faith, requesting an interest-free loan, which is available at many banks for people that are of a certain ethnicity. But at any rate, most people think that when they borrow money, that's what's actually happening, and it is not. The bank is not lending anyone any money. When you sign your promissory note, which is your promise to repay the bank plus interest, then what happens in the system of any bank is that they type in the amount that you want or requesting, and it is depositing that amount into your account. And in its balance sheets, it is both an asset and a liability at the same time. Now, no other institution can do that. No company can book that the way that they're doing it and put it into the system that way. The debt is actually discharged the moment that you sign that promissory note, and that moment everything is actually taken care of. Everything else is the fraud, where you are then trading 30 years of your lifetime to repay something that didn't exist in the first place. That is the result of the Federal Reserve Act and all of its rules and regulations. Now, out of all the money that banks were required to hold as reserve, up until 2020, the Federal Reserve required all banks to hold 3% reserves. Since 2020, quietly, the Federal Reserve changed the rules, so banks are now required to hold 0%. Zero. So there goes that. This was the greatest crime in American history, and because it's so significant for the world, in U.S. history. The Federal Reserve Act needs to be repealed. The Federal Reserve needs to be ended. Legal tender laws force citizens to use government-issued currency instead of alternative financial systems like precious metals, local currencies, or decentralized cryptocurrencies. And here's the very interesting part about those legal tender laws, is that while the government says that you can only use government issued currencies, it does not issue currency. It has outsourced the ability to create and issue currency to a private institution. And here's the kicker: the government itself needs to borrow its own currency from that private institution against interest. You can't make this shit up. And once people, I mean, I've never seen a person in my life that once that penny drops and they understand, really comprehend, it clicks, the light bulb goes off, they really understand how that works, that doesn't just shake their heads and goes, it's all a scam. It's all a scam. Paying down national debt, having, a balanced budget and not a deficit and producing a surplus, it's all complete bullshit. It's all one big scam. None of it matters. What would happen if we pay down all debts, public and private, all of them? There would be no more money, but there would still be a liability for all the interest. So if we just paid down all the debt, right, all the principal amount borrowed, our credit card debt, mortgages, auto loans, home equity loans, government loans, any and all loans, if we pay them all off, there is no more money in circulation, zero, but there are still liabilities, and we still owe the banks the interest, which isn't there because it wasn't created in the initial credit. So it's all one big scam. Anyways. And yes, it is, anyone who wants to really go to the fundamental basics on that, go to G. Edward Griffiths, who wrote the brilliant book, The Creature of Jekyll Island. It's like a standard, should be read by anyone. Okay, let's go to the medical sector. Laws that need to be repealed in the medical sector. For medical and health freedom, laws that enable medical tyranny, forced treatments, and suppression of alternative healing methods. The National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act of 1986, and this goes to all the Reaganites out there who think he was the greatest thing since Jesus. Ronald Reagan signed this into law, which shields pharmaceutical companies from liability, preventing vaccine-injured individuals from suing. Imagine this. Again, most people don't know this. So technically, pharma companies create vaccines, in the case of the mRNAs, which are not vaccines, they're gene therapies at best. This wasn't created by the pharma companies. This was created by DARPA, but okay. But let's talk about all the conventional vaccines. So a company creates a vaccine. The government then basically mandates those vaccines to most groups of people. If and when something happens because of this vaccine that was taken, an injury, a death, or something, the pharma companies have no liability. The government assumes liability. Where in the world is this possible? Where does a privately owned company get that kind of deal? This is like saying, you're a car producer, Ford or Tesla or whoever, doesn't matter. And the government first says, well, you got to have a car. We're pretty strict about that. You have to have a car. You can't be without a car. But if something happens to you because that car was faulty, because the brakes didn't work or the steering didn't work or whatever, you can't sue the manufacturer. By law, they're not liable. You can try to sue the government. Good luck. That's the insanity of the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act, which is literally created since 1986, a completely false sense of reality. And this is why, when it comes to vaccines specifically, there is a level of resistance in Congress and in the Senate to even look at anything. There's a level of resistance that is directly tied to this sweetheart deal, which of course This keeps the money flowing from the pharmaceutical sector. So this is why they can't have any discussions whatsoever. Should be repealed completely. The Codex Alimentarius, an FDA overreach, regulates and suppresses natural remedies, holistic medicine, and alternative treatments in favor of big pharma. If you don't know what the Codex Alimentarius is, I encourage you to look it up. It is a set of rules and regulations and guidelines about food and food safety and pharmaceutical safety and all kinds of health regulations and guidelines that was actually put out in the 60s by the World Health Organization and has been adopted by the countries through various laws and rules and codes and regulations, which is the opposite of health. It favors big pharma. It favors gene editing. It favors, the GMO foods. It favors and suppresses natural healing methods. It is basically another another guideline that favors the status quo, the sick care or death care system over the healthcare system. Should all be completely dismantled. Number 5, government overreach and emergency powers. Emergency powers have been repeatedly abused to justify unconstitutional actions. The National Emergencies Act of 1976 and continuity of government directives allows presidents to declare indefinite national emergencies, enabling them to bypass constitutional protections. Currently, officially, there are, I believe, 44 ongoing national emergencies. That does not include the PADs or PEDs, which are presidential executive action documents that are usually classified or at least not publicly available, which also direct agencies of the government under certain circumstances, but it's just not known to the public. So we're talking about at least, I think, 40 or 44 publicly available national emergencies that are in place, some of them since the 70s. Every national emergency gives extraordinary powers to the president and the executive branch. And that's why almost no president wants to stop those emergencies. And so they keep renewing those national emergencies and declaring them even if they don't exist any longer, or they maybe never existed in the first place, only the perception. So as you can see, this is a tool that basically says the Constitution doesn't apply here and here and there and there and here and here and there. Everywhere where we declare a national emergency, the Constitution as such does not apply, and we get to legally bypass it for as long as we want to. That's insanity, because you don't have, and that's why we don't have an active constitution that is actually embodied and enacted in government. Exactly because of this. This is one of the tools that is being used, and it's being used by by those presidents who say, oh, the Constitution is not that absolute, and by those who say it's absolute, it's the greatest document ever written. We should absolutely adhere to it unless we don't want to, because it would serve us more and give us more powers and more authority. Then, of course, we don't want to. All of what you're seeing right now, call it good, call it bad, whatever you call it, but all of what you're seeing right now, most of it is only possible because of national emergencies, because of extraordinary powers, because of continuity of government directives. So, has the United States been in a state of emergency ongoing since 1976 at least, and has it been justified for the past 50 years? That such a way of governing is okay? You be the judge of that. I think this needs to be repealed or limited to short-term use with congressional oversight. Yeah, there needs to be definitely a completely different process here, which also goes into declaration of war. Because of this, when was the last time Congress declared a war? Was the attack on Iraq, Afghanistan, was there a declaration of war? Serbia, Bosnia, Yemen, Syria, Ukraine, Israel, Gaza, you name it. All the involvements. Was there any declaration of war? Okie dokie, where's this? There it is. The Insurrection Act of 1807, modified for modern control, allows military deployment against U.S. citizens in vague emergency situations. Once again, these things, there is a prime, a foundational understanding that the military cannot be used under pretty much any circumstances against its own citizens. And that's another way to bypass this. It should be repealed or rewritten to prevent government abuse. Property and land control. Laws that prevent true ownership and self-sufficiency. Agenda 21, sustainable development policies. Implement land control and restrict private property rights under the guise of environmental protection. You've seen this in states like California that have insane policies that lead to the direct energy weapon attacks, and that can't be fought off. You don't have access to what you need because you don't have access to water, you don't have access to the infrastructure, and that's happening all over the place, by the way, not just California. And this insanity is a government land grab, by the way, and we always see this. This should be dismantled to restore property rights. Eminent domain laws allow the government to seize private lands for public use or corporate interests. This has been one of the big ones where every time the government wants to do something and people are not in sync with it, they just invoke eminent domain. Another one that should be immediately repealed in all states, in all jurisdictions, is property taxes. Property taxes are the greatest scam ever because property taxes are rent to the government. On a property that you buy outright, you buy that, you pay whatever you pay with fake money from the fake banks, and then you got to pay the government, basically, you pay them a ransom fee so they don't evict you from your own land every year. Property taxes are one of the biggest scams, should be repealed also immediately. So what else do we have here? Let me see. Nothing, just a conclusion. By repealing these laws, people can regain access to suppressed technologies, control over their own health and financial systems, and freedom from government and corporate manipulation. What else could we want? So the truth is that in the nation, in the home of the land of the free, the home of the brave, there are laws in the books that literally prevent both of these things from actually happening. And people were born into a life where they were already on the books and they think this is normal. They think this is how life is supposed to be. That's just how it is. If, and this is a huge if, right? This is a huge if, but if the people that have stepped into power, and it's far more than just the administration, it's far more than just a cabinet. There is a, that's a trickle down thing that happens through agencies now. There will be huge new hirings in agencies. It's a trickle down that happens in the state legislatures. I mean, it's happening everywhere. If this new movement that under the MAGA umbrella is serious about freedom, is serious about sovereignty and self-sufficiency, then they need to come together. Everybody needs to come together and start working on repealing these laws and codes and regulations, because otherwise you will work within a framework that will never allow people to make certain things happen. Like I said before, nothing just changes. People make change happen. So you either part of the changers or you're part of those who are being changed. There's only the two. There's no stagnation. This world as it is right now doesn't allow for stagnation. But, education is key. Knowing these things, studying these things, and then seeing where you want to apply yourself. We all need to apply ourselves in something. And those who just want to sit back, consume, and observe, yeah, that's not going to work. You're going to be removed, not by us, but by the same powers who are already saying, we won't really need humans much longer. And the ones that will remain will change them. That's what the plan is. So let's take action. Let's take matters into our own hands. And like I've said yesterday, during such a period of transformation as we're in, you cannot control all of it from the top down. It is impossible. If you look at hiring freezes throughout all government sectors, if you look at buyout offers to the entire government has received a buyout offer. All federal 2 million plus federal employees have received a buyout offer where they can quit their jobs and get paid for another 8 months or so in benefits. So you can't fully control such huge developments as much as they try to. It's impossible. There's no possibility to fully control that, which is the opportunity, because it means that people can step in and step up and start, on this. It's like plowing a field. The field is being plowed. And now the question is, what kind of seeds are getting into that dirt? And people have to see that the opportunity to plant the seeds right now is bigger than it's ever been. That's the upside of what's happening. The opportunity to plant seeds is bigger than it's ever been. And so we need some go-getters, some people who are willing to do some things and initiate some things on all levels. We're doing our very best to present opportunities and ideas and bring people on that have those. That's what we can do. All right, my friends, thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you for all who joined us on Locals, where we're talking about some serious things. Of course, we're talking about deeper connections. We're talking about what is happening with our beautiful community, but we're also talking about the carb wars of 2025 in the Nolan household. There's a serious thing going on here. We're sitting on opposite ends of the table, my wife and I, and we'll let you know what that means over on Locals if you want to join us. This is getting serious. So join us at inspired.locals.com. We'd love to see you over there. All right, my friends, much love, many blessings, and we will be back with you again very, very soon.
Listen, right now you could be only a few clicks away from experiencing something amazing, something that has changed thousands of lives all over the world. I'm talking about a high consciousness field similar to those at pilgrimage sites and sacred places. It's where people go to heal, to connect, and to become the best possible version of themselves. With FLFE, you can bring such a high consciousness field into your home right now. It's a spiritual quantum technology based on the work of Nikola Tesla. Better sleep, more energy, greater well-being, improved finances, electrosmog mitigation. These are only some of the things people on the FLFE service are experiencing. Try it now for 15 days completely free of charge, no credit card needed. Just click on a link down below to start your free, no strings attached FLFE trial right now.